Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Boss, and this is a breakdown of The Penguin Episode 5, Homecoming. The bodies keep piling up on this show as Sofia Falcone steps up as the Gigante of Gotham, and Oz revealing his inner arsonist. If you haven't already, check out Jessica's amazing breakdown of the amazing 4th episode from last week. But now for Episode 5, we gotta break down all the really cool Easter eggs and just details you might have missed in this episode. We open on the close-up of the grill of Oz's busted Maserati, left this way after Vic rammed the Maronis in Episode 3. Lightning flashes on this twisted metal like a broken smile posing for a photo. The way Oz flips open a lighter to set it ablaze foreshadows the way he will do the same gesture to the people who were targeted by this attempted vehicular manslaughter, Nadia and Taj Maroni themselves. Oz tells Vic about Rex Calabrese, that same mobster that he told Alberto Falcone about in the opening scene of the series. He remembers Rex's golden Cadillac that he compares to a Roman chariot. A golden car! That kind of sounds like what a kid from Oz's neighborhood would say about someone, but it wasn't actually golden. That's just like how he remembers it. But even comparing it to a Roman chariot is a common thing among Italian immigrants and organized crime, that they will romanticize, literally romanticize, their past as they consider themselves the descendants of Roman emperors. This is actually where men who think about the Roman Empire at least once per day really comes from, I think. It really should be men from Jersey think about it once per day. And Oz does a Roman Catholic sign of the cross to preside over this car's funeral, saying it's an end of an era, referring to both his ride and really the end of Rex's era. Oz may romanticize Rex's Pax Romana, but he considers himself a wartime emperor. After letting Graciela head out California way in Episode 3, Vic is now all in on earning Oz's respect, echoing Oz's description of a car as a chariot and telling him that he's ready to prove himself.
Let's fucking go. I like that.
Is this the first time Oz has heard the phrase, let's go? I mean, I guess this scene would be set in 2022, but people were like saying it then too. Oz tells his crew, when I eat, you eat. That's how it's always been. A similar proposition Sofia offers her men when she takes over that organization. Now, Oz pulls up TikTok to find a video of Taj Maroni, an account named View from the Taj. This is a real TikTok account, but as of this taping has no posts. I'm just impressed that Oz uses TikTok and knows to go look for Taj on TikTok to locate where Taj would be, which would mean that Oz would have to be like refreshing this TikTok at least once every hour, and is smart enough to deduce that a full back tattoo would take several hours, yet still somehow doesn't know the phrase let's fucking go. I fantasize about having my own personal chef. Somebody who can do all the hard work of menu planning and meal prep. Someday I'll get there, but in the meantime, I've got Cook Unity. Cook Unity is basically a pipeline from your home to dozens of talented chefs that cook delicious incentive meals fresh every day in regional micro kitchens, not warehouse production facilities. Their roster of all-star chefs include Food Network alums, James Beard Award winners, and acclaimed restaurateurs. Cook Unity is the first chef-to-consumer platform that delivers freshly prepared, pre-selected meals right to your door weekly. The subscription is super flexible. You can pause, skip weeks, or cancel at any time. It's super easy to do. You can pick from over 350 meals each week based on your dietary needs or what kind of cuisine you like. Monday night, you could have Ruben Garcia's crispy tilapia. Tuesday's dinner could be Esther Choi's teriyaki roasted salmon. And Wednesday could have Stacey Barang's grilled Asian hanger steak. I, for lunch today, have decided to eat crispy pork cutlet and vegetable fried rice from Nora Nolasco. Go to cookunity.com/NRockstars50 or click the link in the description and use my code NRockstars50 to get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals to try them out for yourself. Taj's tattoo appears to be a phoenix, which foreshadows his burning to death later in this episode. And in the tattoo parlor, the song that Taj is listening to is Note Sia by Farsha, and that's a hip-hop artist based in Tehran, which would make sense for Taj's Iranian heritage from his mother's side. And we stay in Taj's point of view as he's vaping, of course he is, and I'm wondering if he's blasting this music in his ear because like the sound of the tattoo needle might have bothered him too much. So he doesn't hear Oz and his men killing everyone in the parlor, and these people may include both Maroni Muscle and maybe just some other tattoo artists and patrons who were just getting inked that day, and Taj doesn't realize it until the blood literally spatters on his face. And notice it's Vic who puts in the extra effort to grab Taj before he can jump over that fence. Vic is doing everything he can to earn the extra credit in this episode. Oz shows Sal and Nadia Maroni a Polaroid of Taj holding today's issue of the Gotham Gazette to let them know that they recently have him. The headline is GCPD apprehends 8 suspects in connection with Falcone Maroni violence. This could be a story about the Maronis taking over the Admiral Dairy factory where the bleeding tooth mushrooms were being kept by Sofia's group in episode 3, because there must have been some skirmish that resulted in that takeover that otherwise happened off screen. Sal and Nadia speak Farsi in front of Oz, as Nadia is Iranian. This has happened a few times on the show so far, but remember, Oz surprised many of us by proving that he was bilingual. He can speak English and Spanish. And now I'm wondering if he also might understand a bit of Farsi, because he only interrupts them now when they begin to discuss specifically betraying him. On his way out, Oz bribes the guard.
11 o'clock, red jacket.
Presumably, red jacket is kind of corrupt prison guard code for just stab him to death. Oz sees the report of Sophia's massacre of the Falcones on the TV, and the lower ticker from WGOT shows weather forecasts for Chinatown and Coventry. Just a reminder that Coventry is a middle-class district that first appeared in No Man's Land, where it was largely run by Victor Zsasz and Mr. Freeze. And those are two Victors, and I don't think either of them will be what this Victor ends up becoming. He's gonna be his own guy. And we also see Crest Hill, which is also known as Bristol Township. That's where the Falcone estate and Wayne Manor are located. At the Falcone house, Sophia no longer hides her neck scars, which might be her way of playing innocent in front of the cops and the news cameras. Like if she was scarred, she just looks more like a lucky survivor than the person who perpetrated this mass murder. The niece, Gia, is taken away by a van labeled Brookside Children's Home, which isn't a known orphanage or social agency from the comics, but we'll keep our eye on it because maybe one of the Robins could be there. Chief Mackenzie Bach returns from the 2022 The Batman film, played by actor Khan O'Neill, known for his distinctive voice, and playing Viktor Brukhanov in HBO's Chernobyl. In the Batman film, he put an APB on the Batman later in the film after they had words at the GCPD.
You son of a bitch. You have any idea what kind of trouble you're in?
In the comics, Mackenzie Bach was a detective during the No Man's Land storyline who protected his home turf. He had to do deals with the Penguin to ensure proper medical supplies and drugs were available for civilians. I'm just bringing up all these like different neighborhoods and No Man's Land references that seem to be in the show because I really do think that's what the show is setting up for the second film. Chief Bach addresses Sophia as Miss Falcone, and she corrects him as I prefer Sophia, signaling that she's already moving on from Falcone as a family name. Sophia indicates Johnny Vitti might be responsible following an argument about Luca's wife. That's one reason she kept Johnny alive, to have a patsy to blame the massacre on, a capo with a known love triangle drama with Luca Falcone and his wife. When Bach insinuates Sophia is probably involved with it, Sophia calls him out as the chief of police making house calls. And in the background, you can see FBI agents on the scene, which makes sense because, the Falcones are a known crime organization under federal jurisdiction. And you can imagine that Bach would just want to be there too for local political reasons, specifically in the eye line of press to look like he's also in charge. Sophia accuses Bach, though, of being there because he's worried about no longer having the kickbacks that the GCPD got from the Falcone family, and specifically says that his officers might swap photos of her dead relatives, which could be a nod to the LA County Sheriff's deputy who was accused of sharing photos at a bar of Kobe Bryant and other victims from that fatal helicopter crash in 2020. Sophia is keeping Johnny Vitti tied up in the Falcone family tomb. She has a horse bridle in his mouth, likely from the Falcone family stables. Now, this being a show inspired by The Sopranos, watchers of The Sopranos will remember that in season 2 and season 3, Tony Soprano had a very close relationship with the horse Pyomai that became a big point of contention with Ralphie, which when you rewatch that show, you realize was actually unresolved issues over Ralphie murdering a dancer from the Bada Bing, whom Tony referred to as a thoroughbred at one moment to Silvio. It's a big motif in The Sopranos that Tony Soprano ends up kind of transferring his feelings for human beings onto animals. Like in the pilot episode, he's like obsessed with these ducks, and that's where he has his first panic attack on the show. So I bring all this up as just a way of saying Sophia treating Johnny like a horse is meant to foreshadow the horse being put down. Sophia dumps water on Johnny to induce some hypothermia. It's just interesting how Sophia tortures her captive with chilling water, while Oz tortures his captives and kills them by dousing them with flammable fluid to burn them alive. Oz watches on GC1 continued coverage of the Falcone massacre, and the weather ticker now mentions neighborhoods like Blackgate Isle, that's the location of Blackgate Prison, Lintown, that's actually a location of a gang war in the besieged Batman storyline where Gotham has become a war zone, Burnley, which is also a neighborhood mentioned in No Man's Land, a district held by crime lord Abel Crown, Coventry again, and then Bristol, that's the other name for Crest Hill, Irving Grove, that's where Penguin's mother's house is, and Otisburg, which comes up as a gag in Richard Donner's 1978 Superman the movie.
Otisburg?
But in the comics, actually does appear as a neighborhood in Gotham in the No Man's Land storyline, home to the Knightsdome Stadium where the Gotham Knights play. While chatting with Eve, Oz drinks Blanton's bourbon. He's got such good taste in whiskey, this guy. And I like the detail that the noise-canceling headphones that Taj was wearing in the tattoo parlor are now being used to deafen him from their conversations in this apartment. Oz tries to get his men not to worry about all their dead superiors in the Falcone family, just to make it seem like he was well aware that this was gonna happen and that he and Sophia are still on good terms.
Right, but none of those were friends of ours. They never made us.
And it's interesting that Sophia will say pretty much the exact same thing when she takes over her crew, but he pulls Vic aside and says that Sophia actually cannot be trusted and that she's going to be coming after them. And I like how of all these people, Eve always has Oz's number. Sophia waits out a shivering Johnny Vitti in the tomb, lying beside the graves of her relatives Carmine, Isabella, and Alberto. Johnny tells Sophia that Isabella was going to leave Carmine, which is why he killed her, and he also tries to lay the blame for Isabella's death on Sophia and Alberto, saying that Isabella would have left if it wasn't for her kids. And that is a big mistake in the context of this scene for him. We learn that Johnny was Isabella's cousin. He introduced her to Carmine, and we learn that her last name was Gigante. While Johnny expresses sadness for Isabella, Sophia rightfully points out that Johnny kept working for Carmine for years anyway. It's actually the same excuse Oz gave for ratting out Sophia to Carmine, but when Sophia confronted Oz about it, at least he was able to admit that in his mind it was worth it because he got the iceberg lounge out of it. Vic goes to Irving Grove to check on Francis. On the TV is this scene from the movie Gloria, directed by John Cassavetes and starring Gina Rowlands. The line is, "What are you gonna do, shoot a Puerto Rican kid in the street?" Which could be foreshadowing to Victor, a Puerto Rican, his fate on the show. In this film, Gloria, the former girlfriend of a gangster, protects this young kid whose family was murdered by the mob. I guess you could say it parallels Oz's relationship with Victor. Now, Francis's house is covered in sticky note reminders, which happens sometimes when someone is losing their memory. We see that the fridge is left open and the stove was left on. Francis, meanwhile, is in her bedroom going through Oz's old stuff and thinks that Victor is Oz for a moment and finds his old baseball glove, a glove that will go back on Oz's hand later in this episode. Vic tells Francis that Oz killed the Maronis, which of course is not true, but Victor saw how poorly Francis spoke to Oz the first time he came over there. He's probably trying to make Oz look good for Francis. He knows how much Oz craves his mother's adoration and respect. Meanwhile, in Sal Maroni's prison cell, he has a photo of Nadia and Taj. The prison guard red jackets him, saying this is from Oz, which would not be necessary for the guard to say, and makes it clear to Sal who paid him, so that was a mistake. Guard. Oz tells Nadia at the Admiral Dairy Factory, where the mushroom cultivation was going on back in episode 3, this is the place that the Maroni set out taking over. Taj is visibly dripping when he comes out of the van, meaning this actor got a wet bump in his pay rate. Nice, my man. We see that Oz has covered his mouth in duct tape, and you can see poor Taj desperately trying to warn his mother that he's covered in flammable fuel. Oz sends him out at gunpoint, Taj's feet bound so that he has to waddle slowly and trail all this fuel in an unbroken line along the ground. And yes, he also waddles like a penguin. And as he approaches his mother, right before Nadia hugs him, you can see Taj shaking his head no. Even before Nadia's men open fire on Oz, you can see Oz reaching into his pocket for his lighter. He was going to burn them either way. And sure enough, even when Oz and his guy defeat the Maroni guys, and he totally could have left with the shrooms, he still ignites his lighter and sets both Taj and Nadia on fire, and he watches, a faint smile forming as they scream to death. Holy shit. In case any viewers started to like Oz, nope, sorry, he is a goddamn monster. He actually showed more sympathy for his freaking car when he torched it. Like when we saw Sophia gas her family last episode, it was at the end of an episode where we learned all of them had betrayed her and framed her, dooming her to this Kafka-esque life of suffering at Arkham that had no end in sight. And so it felt like an earned victory seeing this scorned woman unleash the fury of hell. In this case, the Maroni's moves against Oz did not at all warrant this kind of punishment. This was just indulgence by Oz and evil. While Heath Ledger's Joker burned alive Mr. Lau on a pile of money, Joker didn't stand around to watch him scream himself to death as his flesh was consumed by flames with a creepy look in his eye the way Oz watches this. And really, because he lingers for so long, the fire trips the fire retardant spray. Glad to see this dairy factory was up to the fire marshal's code. I guess milk is known to spontaneously explode. And we get this great insert shot of the shrooms getting doused by the spray. Remember in episode 3, we were told that the mushrooms are vulnerable to temperature changes. So this fire system, and really Oz's excessive overkill, is what loses him most of the product. Now, this rendezvous point is beneath an old campaign billboard for former Mayor Don Mitchell Jr., the mayor the Riddler murdered in the 2022 Batman film. This billboard, you'll note, is tagged with a green Riddler symbol. Beneath that sign is a drops sign. The Police song, da-da-da, is playing. This is a song about how words can have two meanings. It reflects how Oz really operates, talking out of both sides of his mouth. We are much farther away from Gotham now. You can see the city skyline in the distance. This, along with Sophia's line earlier to the chief about being far out of the city of Gotham, shows how a lot of this criminal work is just happening on the fringes of the city. Only 2 buckets of shrooms survived the spray. Oz is lucky he salvaged that much. We're wondering what happened to Dr. Trey Bloom. Remember that hippie mycologist who is cultivating the product in episode 3? I feel like he could help regrow these. Sal Maroni calls on Mikey the prison guard's cell phone saying thanks for the keys. Aha, a Clancy Brown character escaping from prison? Oh, the Shawshank Redemption parallels. I really hope Sal Maroni had to like crawl through a sewage drainage pipe into a rainstorm and then raised his arms dramatically. Sal says that Oz is cooked, and Oz, hearing the word cooked, cannot help but appreciate the verbal irony. And he tells Sal to call his wife. Another brash, excessive decision. Had he not told Sal that he did this, it probably would have taken Sal at least a day to realize what had happened and that Oz was behind it. Oz calls Vic to ask about his mom.
How is she?
Yeah, no, she's
Vic, how is she?
Remember, Oz had told Vic not to let people interrupt him when he was stuttering back in episode 3 when they were at the restaurant. So Oz clearly just drops all of his decency when he's worried about his mom. Oz tells Vic to get Francis out of there now that Oz has heat on him in the form of a very vengeful Sal Maroni who's loose on the streets. Sophia tries to see if her mom's clothes still carry her scent, and you can tell by the wallpaper that this was Isabella's room, wallpaper that we saw in Sophia's hallucination back at Arkham in episode 4. I assume Carmine kept this room as a form of performative grief, you know, to kind of play the part of the widower since all the family and their collaborators operate out of this mansion. Of course, it is one of these furs that Sophia will use for her new look. Dr. Julian Rush greets her, having seen the massacre on the news and knowing Sophia is behind it and wanting to be a part of it. I am keeping my eye on this guy. I am wondering what his involvement is with Arkham and who might be in charge of Arkham now. I have a feeling it's going to be a Hugo Strange figure. Sophia reintroduces herself to what's left of the Falcones with the fur coat and the eye makeup. She better reflects the form of Sophia Falcone from the comics. She also now proudly shows off her scars, including her shoulder burn scar. We're still waiting to learn the source of that. I assume it was something that she got at Arkham. She now goes by her mother's maiden name of Gigante. Now, Sophia Gigante was actually one of the alternate universe versions of her in the Flashpoint storyline, where she was police commissioner. Sophia just comes out and says that she gassed the family, and you can hear the henchmen all gasp and murmur, Jesus Christ. Johnny Vitti goes ashen with her revealing this news. I think he now realizes that that was the one piece of leverage he had over Sophia, the knowledge of what really happened, and now that leverage is gone. You can see Sophia had the Falcone family portrait removed. This was normally hanging on the wall where Dr. Rush is standing in this scene. Johnny tells her in front of everyone not to be rash, but Sophia just offs him in front of everyone. Michael Kelly, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, my man. I feel like Sophia was planning on taking out Johnny before too long anyway, but this moment is a critical performance for Sophia. She must prove her power in front of all remaining Falcone operatives and show that she won't tolerate any dissent in front of everyone from the old guard. Luca deprived her of the chance to step up as the feared leader of the family back in episode 2 when he shot Castillo instead of letting her do it. And now she doesn't waste any time making a demonstration kill out of Johnny Vitti. And the blood from Johnny's head oozes across the table, drowning the reflection of his head on the surface of the table. She dumps Carmine's cash supply in the blood pool and waits for the goon to call her by her proper name, Ms. Gigante, and she nods, and the goons just grab up that bloody money like piñata candy, pour on the floor style. Vic takes Francis to Crown Point, his old neighborhood. Earlier in the show, this neighborhood was called No Man's Land, which again, I think is setting up Crown Point as really the ground zero for when Gotham will inevitably descend into a No Man's Land crossover event from the comics that I think Matt Reeves is using for the Batman 2 in 2026. We see posters for Bella Real, as well as a We Are Gotham poster featuring, looks like a basketball player, I assume from the Gotham Knights. That kind of reminds me of the LeBron posters that were around Cleveland when he was on the Cavs. Squid Watch, it's back on as we see Squid, the thug that Vic was worried about in the episode 3 prologue scene. And now Squid is leading some other punks into looting shops. Squid does see them going into the building, but we don't see him acting on it in this episode. So I assume that this is going to come back in a future episode. And throughout Crown Point, we see some disaster zone markings. We saw these a lot in New Orleans post Katrina. We also see some FEMA X codes. Based on this chart, it means that this building was cleared on November 7th, which would be 2 days after the flood, and it was cleared by the GCPD. And NE on the right means no entry, as the building is not safe to enter. And on the bottom, 0 to 3 indicates no survivors found, but 3 dead bodies were found. Victor takes her to Calvin's apartment, who was his friend that Sophia shot in the head in episode 1, and I think this is the building that Vic and the rest were on top of when the seawall detonations occurred and the floods happened. Frances has brought with her this particular lamp, which kind of looks like something representative of that jazz age that she and Oz would romanticize. Oz tries to get Eve to go with him to Crown Point, saying Vic found a place by the zoo. This is the liquor store in Crown Point that the Bella Real poster was hanging from, but Eve doesn't want to go with him, and I kind of feel worried about Eve. Oz is so worried that Eve was playing him and might have another wealthier, more powerful guy on the side. It's the same lashing out that he does with Vic, right? He forces people to be around him and then builds a narrative in his head that they want to be there. And then when they don't and want to get away, he feels betrayed and lashes out violently. At Sal Maroni's safe house, Sophia kills all of his guys and notices Sal's Antonucci's Italian takeout, which she says did not travel well. And I think we should note is the same issue Oz had trying to transport the mushrooms. Some num-nums just aren't as good DoorDashed. Sophia acknowledges that the Maronis loving their family members was a virtue that she admires because it was something the Falcones never really had, and that's why she is rebranding as the Gigantes. She offers to join forces with the Maronis to take down Oz and take over the city. Oz and Francis hint at Oz's dead brothers, Jack and Benny.
The city took him. And there was nothing I was too weak.
I'm curious what's going on here. Were they killed by the police? Was this something that could have happened in the trolley tunnels that Oz said he used to explore with them? Could have been some other infrastructure failure that might have killed them. It sounds like they were still fairly young when they died. I wonder if it's tied to the mismanagement of funds from Thomas Wayne's Gotham Renewal Corporation. So Oz finds an old trolley token and remembers the underground infrastructure for the city. Now, Gotham City in Matt Reeves' Batman universe does have an underground subway system. Remember, Bruce had built his Batcave in an underground train station terminal that had been abandoned. But this trolley system, I suspect, might have been regional to the Crown Heights neighborhood. And because the city doesn't care about this borough, Oz talks about how city leaders got greedy and gutted the system's funding and then left it to this current squalor. In most cities in America, trolleys don't really connect one neighborhood to another neighborhood. They circulate within a regional neighborhood to help the locals do things like run errands or get to and from their jobs within the neighborhood and from their homes to a larger commuter hub where they would transfer to a subway and go to a different neighborhood. Really, trolleys are especially beneficial to like families and the elderly. So the Crown Point's trolley would have been gutted just to keep these types of the Crown Point folk away from the rest of the city and to make it harder for them in their daily lives in these neighborhoods. A Forest by The Cure starts playing. It's about being lost in the woods, chasing phantom women and disembodied voices. Oz realizes that the dark, humid setting down here is perfect for cultivating mushrooms, and we should note that mushrooms do not need sunlight or photosynthesis to grow. Oz pronounces this as our new base of operations, or we could say the Penguin Cave. This does feel a bit like Batman Returns, where Danny DeVito's Penguin used Gotham's sewer system to sneak around. And I like how composer Mick Giacchino, Michael Giacchino's son, mixes in what sounds like a bit of a leitmotif to Danny Elfman's iconic Batman theme music from those first two films by Tim Burton.
Place. Calling me home.
Hey, a big thanks to Noah Chen and Brandon Barrick for their help researching and writing this breakdown. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss. Subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.